the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things. Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast. I'm your host, Alison Nissen, and today I am lucky enough to have with me McKenna Dean. McKenna, could you give us a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
Elevator pitches are always difficult for me because I tend to write very long stories, and there's an art to telling things in a short amount of time. Elevator pitch, I have to say that I like writing stories that have a little bit of a twist to them. I like turning tropes on their heads. I like romance, but romance with a little mystery or a little paranormal excitement, something that is romance and is how I like to put it. I frequently say that I like putting my characters in hot water to see how strong they are, like Teabags, only sexier. And that's the enjoyment that I get. I like putting characters in difficult situations and seeing what they're made of. My goal as a storyteller is to take you as the reader out of your own lives for a couple of hours, to just let you put aside the stress of the world or the personal responsibilities you have in your work life or your home life, and just have a little fun.
I love the idea of taking a trope and turning it on its head. Do you typically write romance with the and, or do you write multiple things with ands?
It's typically romance with the and. I think that romance makes everything more interesting. The stories that I love best have a romantic element to them, but I also want that little bit extra. I want them to solve a mystery. I want them to be in danger. I want them to have to overcome something.
Yes, putting them in hot water. I like the tea bag analogy that you offered, and seeing how strong they can become. Do you like strong women? Is that what you're aiming for, or both male and female characters?
I definitely like strong women characters. I like strong male characters. I don't think they necessarily have to be alpha males. I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we think that only the man who's beating his fists on his chest can be the hero. I like an understated hero, somebody who brings out the best in you, and you become better not because they complete you, but because they support you.
Perfectly said. Do your characters interact with a lot of dialogue?
I love dialogue. So that's one of my favorite things. And I like bantering couples. I like that snappy give and take that you see with like the characters on Castle. Kate Beckett and Rick Castle had that little back and forth. And I like that give and take in the relationship. And so, yeah, dialogue is one of my favorite things to write, and it's one of my favorite ways of exploring the different characters.
Where is the craziest place you've discovered great dialogue?
You can just be a fly on the wall in an elevator and hear some conversations that you can't believe people are sharing with other people nearby. And you also have, sometimes in the workplace, people, I find it very interesting that when you have a conversation after a certain hour of the day, people tell you more things than they would tell you otherwise. It's like the floodgates open, and they'll share personal things that they wouldn't share at 8 o'clock in the morning.
That's a really interesting observation. I think, I definitely know as the day wears on, you get a little more tired, and you just, I guess you don't have that same wall that's up. And so it's even pre-wine. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And your decision-making tree, I think, has gotten a little tired. And so you just, I don't know. I've definitely had conversations that have taken place after midnight that are completely different from the same conversation I might have during the day.
100%. I am 100% in agreement with you. My conversations from 8 in the morning to midnight are very different.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part of writing?
Well, I'd have to say that when it's flowing, when it's just pouring out of you and the words are just coming, one right after the other, and the scene is appearing before your eyes, that's just magic. And I do like writing dialogue. I think that your characters come alive when you can share their words and thoughts. I also like writing description of scenery. I read a passage once in which, with one sentence, the author made me see the entire scene in full Technicolor. It was incredible, and I never forgot that. And so I want to do that when I'm describing a scene. I want to be able to make you feel like you're in it. And one of the nicest compliments anybody can tell me is that, I pulled you into the story, or I felt like I was watching a movie. To me, that's my goal. I want you to have that feeling of total immersion.
When you start writing, do you have a plot, or are you more of a pantser?
Well, I used to be more of a pantser. I felt that outlining a story heavily was a story killer for me. And I would have to say that is still to some degree true. But the longer I've been at this, and the more that I'm working on series, you do have to have some sort of plan. You can't just fly by the seat of your pants. And so I've become a little bit more of a plotter as I go along. I would probably say I'm a plantser now. But usually I go into a story with a general idea of what I want it to be about. I have a beginning, I have an end point, and then it gets a little fuzzy in the middle as I connect the dots.
I imagine your dialogue probably comes about more on the pantser side than the plotter side.
Definitely. And sometimes my characters completely surprise me. And I guess that's one of the charm of that's part of the charm of writing for me. I like being surprised. I like when a scene goes in a direction I wasn't expecting. It's a little disconcerting at times when, your characters make a decision that was the exact opposite of the one you expected them to make. And then your beta readers applaud and say, "Oh, that's so fabulous. How did you come up with that?" And you're like shrugging and going, "I don't know. And I hope I can fix it later."
I think we writers need to come up with a term for that, or maybe there is a term for that, but I hear that comment so often that it's like, wow, the characters just did what they wanted to do, and I was just a spectator on the wall.
Yeah, I think it's some sort of subconscious writing, like if you sat down with a Ouija board and let the pen flow, whatever that was. They used to call that some sort of writing. I can't remember the term now, but back in the day, people would sit around and they would take a pencil and they would just write down whatever thoughts came into their head because the spirits told them.
It's a little bit like free writing.
Yes, a little bit.
I think if we took our free writing and we just let the characters do it, Lord knows what would happen. But sometimes they'll come up with some pretty good stuff. Maybe that's what we should do with the world in general. We'll just have everybody sit down and do a free write. Maybe we could solve some of the problems out there in the world. So tell me about how you got started writing.
Well, I've always been a storyteller, and I think that's true of most people who end up as writers. I was the kid that, if I got caught talking in the classroom and the teacher would say, you need to go stand in the corner and talk to the wall. And I would be so entertaining, she would have to make me sit down.
Oh my gosh, that's pretty funny.
Yeah. And I wrote and illustrated my own stories as a child because I was brought up with a love of reading, and I just couldn't get enough of it. And I wanted to spend more time with my favorite characters. And so I would write stories about them and would draw terrible, terrible pictures and put them in a book. And when I was in, I don't know, third grade, I had a little grubby notebook I carried with me, and I had a running serial of stories about a group of horse crazy girls that solved mysteries. And this was incredibly popular among my friends, and there was a waiting list to get the notebook and read the next section. And then, I also grew up in a family, they loved reading, but they were also incredibly practical. And so, your career was supposed to be service-based. We have nurses and doctors and preachers and lawyers in my family, and no writers and no artists. That was something you did for fun or as a hobby. And so we really were kind of discouraged from considering pursuing that. And I have to say, in that day and age, I probably would not have made it as a writer. The world of self-publishing, the ease of springing up of small presses everywhere, that's opened a door for me that probably would have been closed if we were talking about the big six of publishing. And so I came back into writing as an adult, just for fun. I found fan fiction archives and began tentatively posting stories about my favorite characters. And then after a while, I found myself really wanting, to explore my own worlds and create my own characters. And so I submitted a story to a small press. They accepted it, and that I've never looked back.
And you've created something called the Redclaw universe. Can you tell me about it?
In the Redclaw universe, shifters have always been present to a certain extent. The shifters that you would think about, dragon shifters and griffin shifters and phoenixes and things like that. The mythological shifters have always been present in very small numbers, the stuff of legends. But with the advent of nuclear technology in the 1940s and 50s, in my universe, I have that technology triggering latent shifter genes among the general population. And so now we have a new generation of shifters becoming apparent, lions and tigers and bears, to speak of. There's a little bit of tension between the old crowd and the new crowd. There's a lot of power in the older established guard. They like their secrecy, they like their wealth, they like their power. And with the newer generation of shifters emerging, they both aren't sure of their place, but quite a few of them feel like that it shouldn't be a secret anymore, that it should be something that everybody knows about, and that they take advantage of these skills and abilities publicly. I have the Redclaw Origins takes place in the 1950s when all of this is coming about. And then my contemporary series, Redclaw Security, and then the soon to be developed Better Off Red series, those will deal with this time period. The tensions are still there. In my world, the shifters are secret.
Is there romance involved in these?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The Redclaw Security books are standalones, but all centered around Redclaw in some way. Usually each story introduces a character, a pairing. They have their story, and then there are other characters in the background that you can tell will get their own story eventually. Redclaw Origins is a true series. It's based on a set of recurring characters. We're following Rhett Bishop and Peter Knight through their story arc. And they are actually not shifters, but they work for Redclaw Security. And one of the advantages of doing that is it's a little like, in the Harry Potter universe, you have all of this business about magic, but Harry Potter himself was on the outside. He didn't know about this. And so as he gets introduced into that world, you as the reader find out about, muggles and wizards and so forth, as Harry does. And I thought that was one of the advantages to having my characters in the Redclaw Origins series be on the outside, so that I could unfold my story about how this universe works to characters that were on the outside as well.
Well, McKenna, I love this conversation. I think your universe sounds extremely interesting. How can people find out more?
The easiest place is to go to my website, which is mckennadeanromance.com. And from there, you can join my newsletter. You can follow the website. I do try and blog pretty regularly. If you follow me on social media, all of my links are there. I have a nice little link tree, and so you can find my books on Amazon or I'm trying to think of what else is on the link tree. My Goodreads page, my BookBub page, but McKennaDeanRomance.com is probably going to be your best way of finding everything.
Fantastic. We will all go check it out. McKenna, are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
Shoot.
Do you ever celebrate when you drive through a green light and not a red?
Well, sure, because your car is not slowing down.
Where is your happy place to visit?
I like to take the dogs out in the national forest and go way up in the mountains with them. There's something about walking and watching the dogs enjoy themselves in the forest that really lets my mind go to not just a happy place, but to a brainstorming place. That's where I get my best story ideas. That's where the best dialogue comes into mind. I have my eureka moments when I'm doing stuff like that. So yeah, it would definitely have to be, especially in the fall, autumn leaves, crisp underfoot, cool breeze, lake in the distance, that kind of thing.
And finally, what is one thing that money can't buy that makes you happy?
One thing that money can't buy that makes me happy. It's in short supply right now, but it's hugs.
Oh, yes. I think hugs would be a very good thing. Maybe someday we can figure out how to monetize them when we get that. Well, McKenna Dean, thank you so much for stopping by.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been fun.
You all have been listening to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. Alison out.
McKenna Dean has been an actress, a vet tech, a singer, a teacher, a biologist, and a dog trainer. She has worked in genetic labs at a stockyard, behind the scenes as a prop manager, and at a pizza parlor, slinging dough. Finally, she realized all these jobs were just a preparation for what she really wanted to be, a writer. Today, she likes putting her characters in hot water to see how strong they are. Like Teabags, only sexier. For more information about McKenna, visit her webpage at McKennaDeanRomance.com. For more information about the Florida Writers Association, visit us at floridawriters.net.